Good day to you. I want to enter into a little discussion with you about debt, relational debt, unforgiving debt, you supply my demand debt, economic debt, you didn't give me enough debt, you owe me debt. So here's a little story. Your servant, my husband, is dead. My servant served you. The creditor has come to take my 2 children to be his slaves. So this is a story from an ancient time of a family where the fathers create debt and sons have to pay for it. Or the next generation have to pay for it. So I want to interact with you on this. We as fathers, what are the debts we have created that the next generation has to pay? You see, we got a world that was quite bountiful. There was, generally speaking, enough for all. And in 1960, 60% of the GDP was consumed along by 40%. So it was almost reasonably equitable distribution. Then from 1960 came the John Maynard Keynes doctrine. He propounded it in 1948 when the United Nations was coming together for a world economic policy. He said increase the demand and keep supplying. To drive the demand, create need. This was John Maynard Keynes. And this is called Keynesian economics. I want to get quickly to the point of what has happened now. But I want to bring you through to what John Maynard Keynes said. Even till 1960, world's wealth was reasonably distributed within a country amongst its citizens. In the world, amongst its nations. Did you understand the 2 levels? In a country, amongst its citizens, GDP, 60% of it was shared by 40%. Best is 1:1, but this was a 3:2 ratio, which wasn't bad. So it was in the world. Among the nations, the GDP went 3:2 globally. And that is 60% of GDP eaten by 40%. Then John Maynard Keynes said, increase the demand and supply any and everything, and began the consumerist rage. So moment you drive an economy on consuming, manufacturers decide what to sell for profit. In 1960, the world's trade was mostly food and beverages, what man really needs. In 1960 began the Cold War race, because by that time UN was already failing, and the 1956 Korean War pitched the world to show that the detente is actually not working. That is, the communists keep their communist territory, capitalists keep their capitalist territory. In trade, they met together. So economics and trade became a kind of peacemaker after the Second World War, because everybody thought everybody learnt their lessons from Hitler's brutality. So in 1960 began a trade war of sorts. It looked as if it was communist world versus the capitalist world, but it was actually a trade war that would end up with consumers being used as war victims by the producers. I hope you can follow this carefully. So increasingly producers would decide what the consumer should consume. Very quickly, to get into the medical field, always, or up to 1960, drugs and the pharmaceuticals were made for existing diseases. I'll repeat it. Drugs and pharmaceuticals were made for existing diseases. I am Dr. Lalith Mendis. My last substantive post was as head of Department of Pharmacology in a state medical faculty, and my research was on migraine, irritable bowel syndrome, low-dose aspirin, levodopa, Parkinsonism, and on these topics I am published on the PubMed and NIH database. It's there. That's just so that I may justify what I am saying is authentic. So up to 1960, diseases were real and drugs were real. Then began a process of manufacturing diseases so that drugs may be repurposed. So the drug safety and the difficulty and the payment was over. Now increasingly people had to, the pharma industry had to create diseases or define diseases that drugs may earn profit. By 1960 and coming on to 1970, good quality antibiotics had come, and already infectious diseases were now getting controlled because of improving nutrition and improving sanitary care, public health and nutrition, and of course antibiotics. So the main fields in which pharma could earn profit was coming down. So then came the statins theory in 1990. At the same time came the ADHD theory. Then came, by about 1985 already, they were discovering or presenting molecules they said are better than aspirin. So the NSAIDs industry, statin industry, and the ADHD industry, and later on antidepressant industry became major now they were not only producing drugs, they were manufacturing diseases, quite in keeping with Keynesian economics. Now I am published on all this. The last one on ADHD, that ADHD is a problem 70 to 80% created by the digital screen, the impulsivity, inactivity and hyperactivity. I have presented an academic seminar to SLMA sessions 2019, July 27th. It's available on web. If you want to, and I am published on the College of General Practitioners Sri Lanka is using my seminar as continuous professional development, because it's a subject all the time coming before all physicians, especially the family physicians and general practitioners. So I just used an area of my expertise to show you that already from 1960 onwards, consumption would be shifted to, therefore production got shifted to major products that did not involve food and beverages, necessary beverages. So began the armament industry, motor industry, fashion industry, IT industry, toys, confectionaries, big time pharma, cosmetics. So these became major playing industries which man didn't really need. Now petroleum industry is quite a big industry coming up, probably the world's largest turnover, but we agree that petroleum industry was necessary, needed for fuel, till other fuels came or whatever. So here I am getting to the point that by 1990, 90% of GDP was consumed by 10% of the world's people. And the other 90% were left with 10% to manage. So poverty was increasing, while science was developing. People were becoming quite intellectual, and that is called development. But the larger part of the world was getting poor because they were made to consume what they don't need. Necessary things became expensive, like grain, which in 2008 led to a real grain crash issue and a debt crash issue. But by 1990, they were developing ADHD, they were developing statins, and they were developing the antidepressants that man did not need. Now, don't get me wrong, there are drugs man needs. For instance, amoxicillin is an excellent molecule, and British Medical Council recommended amoxicillin as the drug of choice for any upper respiratory tract infection. But many other molecules have been created, augmentin, acetylprin, azithromycin, and so on, which should not be given for first time home contacted infection. That is the advice of the BMC. But that's not how prescription goes. So I took a long time in the field of pharmacology, which is my expertise, to explain to you that debt extractors got whole populations enslaved by debt by selling them products they don't have to consume. And then they got onto the food industry and a fake food industry, genetically modulated food. Then they got onto a fake wellness, illness, health industry. So they get the rich to pay for their rich, lavish lifestyle, but the poor have to pay, are made to pay for their food and for other services dearly. So this is how the debt-making world became. Because I read a little story of a woman crying out, saying, my husband has died, I have no way of paying, and they are coming for my children, which is the next generation. Got my point? The concept I'm developing. One generation was made to consume till the next generation got into debt. I call that debt extraction. So to this I am going to add another story. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I was naked and you clothed me. Now I want you to follow the pathosociology. Now in medicine we have pathophysiology. For instance, when the COVID virus, the spike protein, the S protein, attaches to the ACE2 receptor and gets inside the cell. Then the COVID particle, besides the RNA, has this spike protein which is around it, and it has a lipoprotein shield. It has another protein called the M protein that goes and scuttles the hemoglobin molecule. It has another protein called the E protein that helps the virus particle to creep into the next cell through the syncytial connections. Syncytial is one cell is connected with the next cell, and so this particular virus, CoV2 or COVID-19 virus, is able to go through cell to cell and spread throughout the lung without coming into the interstitium to be attacked by immune cells or antibodies. That's why COVID-19 is so diabolical. And in its RNA, you get the old coronavirus RNA, and at a point in the old coronavirus, the furin enzyme has been applied and a part split off. That's called genetic engineering, where the furin enzyme can be acts. From that you know that RNA strand has been genetically modified. So where the furin acts, at that point they have attached a HIV virus. That's how HIV virus RNA, not the virus, the RNA, that's how that RNA part has given the spike protein greater penetration. That's why this spike protein of CoV2, which is now called COVID-19, rightly so, because CoV2 is quite different from CoV1. And it attaches to our ACE2 receptor and gets into the cells that the ACE2 receptor is. If your nose and pharynx has more ACE2 receptors than others, you contact it more. That is why in the same family, wife died in Matakulia in the first, in Colombo 15 in the first episode, and the husband was a baker. He didn't get it at all. So that means in his nose and throat, the infection, the virus didn't attach. And the action gets worse if you are immune compromised, or if your immunity is already in an attack phase, because our immunological response has an ascending phase, and the good designer has created molecules to stop the attack and bring resolution. So those are called specific proteasolver molecules, SPM. They have fancy names, enhancins, relaxins, defensins, and so on, but you can call them all SPM. So vitamin D improves SPM level. That is why in this second round, everybody is saying take vitamin D and zinc, which is true. Zinc is it makes the cytoplasm and the endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi bodies, you might remember some doctors, they make that liquid alkaline, meaning the pH goes up when the zinc goes in, and then the particle cannot multiply. That's the idea of zinc. Vitamin D increases the SPM, the pro-resolver molecules, so that when the attack is going on, it is contained, so you don't get the cytokine storm. So HCQ, hydroxychloroquine, prevents the attachment and helps transport zinc into the cytoplasm. So you have to give hydroxychloroquine early, and you have to give zinc early. Azathioprine could be given. I am not recommending that, because azathioprine also prolongs the QT interval. There's an ECG change, you remember, whereas hydroxychloroquine and zinc are completely safe. So every person ought to be taking vitamin D and zinc. In India, of course, the ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research, which does not get bothered by Lancet or NEGM. We Sri Lankan doctors are quite slavish to Western manipulation. I say this with responsibility, whereas the Indian scientists do their own science. Now, many Sri Lankan doctors still don't know that Lancet did a retraction of a major article, which article said hydroxychloroquine does not work. It was proved to be fraudulent and full of errors. Erroneous is one thing, fraudulent is another thing. So how on earth Lancet, a major medical journal, allowed it to be deceived itself like that, puts a whole big question on the Lancet view of hydroxychloroquine. Similarly, the New England Journal of Medicine has published a couple of articles, completely no grade, poor quality, to criminalize hydroxychloroquine. Now, I have done a document called COVID Therapy in November. All the last 8 months, all the articles that have proven hydroxychloroquine as effective, I have cited in that. Shortly, it will be on my blog, Dr. Lalith Mendis blog. It will go as COVID Therapy November. You can refer to it. I also have put up articles on what does PCR really mean. Please read it up, Dr. Lalith Mendis blog. I have put up a new article on PCR and immunity, because we need to decide whether we are actually taking proper science into consideration in making the decisions. Now in Sri Lanka, hydroxychloroquine was given in the first round quite effectively, keeping our death rates low. My position is that every person who is PCR positive should be treated with hydroxychloroquine and zinc to reduce inoculation, re-inoculation, where you dump people in the same place PCR positive, they inoculate each other and the virus load goes up. So it is a simple obviously straightforward thinking that every PCR positive person must be given hydroxychloroquine and zinc. This is the recommendation of Dr. Peter McCullough. He is a MD and a public health medicine expert attached to the Baylor Heart Hospital, cardiac hospital in Dallas, Texas, and he has written an excellent thesis published in the Journal of American Medicine. That is still a neutral journal. BMJ is still a neutral journal because they do not depend so much on big pharma. So just by passing, I need to mention the Oxford recovery trial was spearheaded by Professor Landry and Professor Hobby, who are both on the pay list of Gilead Pharmaceuticals. Now, the public knowledge, you only have to go to World Doctors Alliance website and do a read on it. That website, that movement was spearheaded by Professor Dolores Cahill, Irish professor, a lady, a real pioneer and a well-reputed scholar in biotech medicine. Then Professor Harvey Risch, Professor of Epidemiology, Yale, also has published an outstanding article on why hydroxychloroquine is effective. Why it is not being given is his question. I have written about this. So that I deviated quite a bit into the technical area on this thing of who creates illness. Now I'll read it again. I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. So there are some people who make people hungry and other people who alleviate hunger. So in this story, the people who create hunger are called the goat kind. And I'm not taking my own language, I'm just reading the story. And those who you gave me something to eat, those people are called the sheep kind. Okay, so there is a real battle on in the world between the goat kind and the sheep kind. They also happen to be, or when you analyze the sociology, the pathosociology, you find the global kind, the globalists, the oligarchs who own the 400 brands, and they recruit locals and nationals to serve their purpose. That is how all world bodies go: UNESCO, UNICEF, UNFPA and the WHO. It's not health for all, it is disease for some and profit for others. That's how it goes. You remember my primary thesis? There are manufacturers of diseases and drugs, and there are consumerist slaves. We are back to the age of Pharaoh. Of course, now the Pharaoh does not use a terrible whip. Pharaoh uses pandemics, viruses and vaccines. So in the past 10 years, Gavi, that's the organization floated by Bill Gates, earned quite large sums of money on the vaccine industry. Just now on the vaccine scene, the Oxford vaccine produced by Professor Sarah Miller, who is also the lady who produced the Ebola vaccine. Pfizer got onto that vaccine and they are saying it is 90% effective. We have to wait and see whether the effectivity is based on antibodies or on T-cell mediation. Now, what really is important with the vaccine is vaccine must prepare us or the person who receives the vaccine into trained, adaptive, innate immunity which involves T cells. If a vaccine publication says the antibody level rose and antibody level was there for 4 months, that is not a true report, that's a fake report to get the public interested to swallow the fake. So I must say it's a good hope that Oxford vaccine rather than Sinovac is getting promoted. So we need to take care and advise everybody to check out the Oxford vaccine. Meanwhile, India is offering us their vaccine. I rather tend to trust Indian science, though most Sri Lankans have nasty things to say about India. Indian science is excellent. Indian 5-year plans have done very well. Indian bureaucracy runs their country quite well. So we need to ICMR. I can send you all these clips. If you would send me a WhatsApp too, plus 94 77 49 59 214. Or else you can go on my Facebook timeline or my blog, Dr.Lalith Mendis blog.wordpress.com, or my YouTube channel. This is actually my 107th clip on this got a little deviated into COVID science. I wanted to really do one on science and reason, the sociology, the way it is going. So I get back, okay? I get back to I was hungry, those who make people hungry. You gave me something to eat. The sheep kind is different. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. So thirst is, I call it a pollution. I take a metaphorical sense of thirst, while the Third World War will probably be about drinking water. And Sri Lanka has the highest potable water quotient compared to our land area, where we are very rich with drinkable, potable, good water. That's a good God resource we have. I was a stranger and you invited me in, which means aliens are created, migrants are created by engineered wars. You saw what happened to the Middle East. And when these people go to other countries, they are easily recruitable for violence. Black Lives Matter or whatever else, they are recruitable for violence. You can see in France what's happening. Other European countries, a large migrant force who are recruitable for ideologies. That's what's happening. Similarly, strangers and aliens were created also when our young people leave home for greener pastures in other countries, big brain drain. I'm suggesting it is engineered. Every parent will be wise to get your son and daughter to do the first degree in Sri Lanka. Now in all fields, the first degree can be done in Sri Lanka. Keep your relationship with your son and daughter at that critical age between 18 and 21. It will be extremely unwise to send them abroad for a first degree when we have excellent education. And in many countries now, though you take a first degree in Australia, for instance, they will not get jobs. They won't even get PR unless that first degree they did is relevant for that country. That's why it has gone. So I'm on the point of I was a stranger. Who is creating aliens? Who is invading family? Who is invading national boundaries? Who is working to get our next generation out of home, out of the nation, often never to return? You have to see it as an engineered process. And you clothed me, I beg your pardon, and you invited me in. So those who create homelessness, you understood what I mean by homelessness, actual, factual or allegorical homelessness. They lost home, they lost contact with parents, they are living for themselves, seeking their own future. So it's an engineered lifestyle promoted by the digital screen. I have done many clips on the digital science, please go check them. So this is about, then others who are trying to keep home, keep family. I have done many times how family is broken with gay rights, LGBTQ, abortion, premarital sex, extramarital sex, divorce and remarriage, how the family is incessantly invaded. Once, now some time back we said these are Western values, but you can see these are not merely Western values, these are cultivated values by a global force. In the American election, you will see there are people who still think for their nation, and there are people who think for globalism, which they violate national boundaries, they violate national interest, and they sell the nation to the global plot. I think it is emerging more clearly now. Then I was naked and you clothed me. That's the next thing. Nakedness, we know, is big time industry. Pornography, spa, then the gambling part of it, big time industry, getting people into debt. Recently there was a report that 1 in 10 kids in England are into serious debt by doing digital gambling. It is engineered. Now they are trying to make legislation, close the stable door once the horse has fled. So this is about creating nakedness and using that for industry. We know it was a big time industry. And then the sheep kind, you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. That's the point at which I went into a long digression on the COVID situation, creating diseases but then others who are ameliorating or working to help heal. Now, my talk on virus, pandemic and vaccine, how Dr. Fauci of CDC US shifted gain on function virus research to Wuhan, you need to go back to a clip and say, or send me to my WhatsApp number +94 77 49 59 214, then I'll send you the clip you're asking for. I can't do it today. So this is sickness created, sickness, wellness, illness industry, big time now. It's on par with cosmetics, toys and confectionaries, all unnecessary, yes. Then finally I was in prison and you came to me. So increasingly laws that are removing personal freedoms. That's the plan. That's the plan of the pandemic. I think I have explained this to you enough, how the world has moved. My suggestion is that we need a good shepherd because we are sheep. If we don't have a good shepherd, some ideology we will follow. We will either follow the pride of our head or someone else's scheme when we don't know a good shepherd. Mankind is designed to listen and follow. And that becomes a problem when we don't know what we should listen to. Just hear me out on it and consider it, whether we need a good shepherd to take care of our life. Once upon a time, I also thought my brain is enough because in my advanced level examination, I came first in the island, and in every medical exam in the Colombo Medical Faculty, I was batch top. So for a long time, I thought my head is enough, but I found when my brain was becoming apparently brilliant, my heart was shrinking. So I came to an ideological point of deciding I need a good shepherd. You can consider it for yourself, you are wise enough. So that was a little talk about debt makers who make others debt-ridden, driving the consumerist extravaganza and new pharaohs owning the global brands, including the pharma brands, and then we have slaves in every country because of consumerism. Big time, cruises, vacations, second house, cars, clothes, all on credit card debt, spending more than you can earn. So with the COVID crisis, we are in a real crisis. So we need a good shepherd is my suggestion. Thank you for listening.